Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and Restless official. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the park, Nate, with Audra, reminds Amy of the importance of keeping a positive attitude. Amy says she's finally listening and has come to a decision about her future. How will it impact this newly forming clan? As Nikki's birthday celebration got underway, mysterious invites from Dumas went out to many to attend a party he'll be hosting in the south of France. We won't have to wait much longer to meet him, as the party is scheduled to kick off on June 13th. Should folks be worried that the event is being held on Friday the 13th? At Nikki's party, Kyle and Claire discuss filling one another's dance cards, but first, he's got something he needs to take care of. What? Well, a move he hopes might make an impression on Victor. Has Kyle learned nothing from his dad, who has battled the mustache unsuccessfully for literally decades? Finally, it looks as if even before he makes his grand appearance, Dumas is managing to stir up trouble, especially where Billy and Sally are concerned. Is she right to be worried that he's so heavily invested in Dumas as opposed to focusing on their new company? He might also want to keep at least one eye on Phyllis, who is cooking up a scheme of her own. Nikki imagined how Victor would react if he knew she was already relying on Jack, and she worried that Victor was going through enough stress without her telling him she'd chosen someone else to support her. Nikki insisted that she had to spare Victor. Okay, Jack conceded, and she thanked him for dropping whatever he'd been doing to spend time with her. Jack shared that he'd been at society, having a drink with Victor and trying to get a read on how Victor was reacting to everything. Nikki snapped that it was exactly what Jack shouldn't have done. Nikki admonished Jack for seeking Victor out to interrogate him. Jack assured her that he was an old hand at getting information out of Victor without Victor realizing it, and the one big thing he'd gotten was that Victor loved her and would do anything in his power to protect her, including accepting Jack as her sponsor. Nikki maintained that Victor couldn't know anything about it, and she insisted on getting through it herself with the support of someone who truly understood what it was like. "I'm your guy," Jack affirmed. Jack returned home to the Abbott mansion. Diane greeted him and mentioned that she'd expected him earlier. He relayed that he'd received a distress call from Nikki, so he checked in on her at her office, where Victor had almost walked in on them. Jack hated what the secret was doing to Nikki, and he lamented that he was worried about her. Jack recounted that he'd seen Nikki fight the battle more than once, but there was fear in her eyes that he'd never seen before, and she was doing everything she could to seem in control. Diane asked if it was what it had been like for him. Jack didn't remember feeling the urge for pills, but he recalled the ugliness his addiction had caused, and detox being a living hell. Diane worried that it was too much for him to take on, but he assured her that there was no reason to be concerned. He opted to focus on her, and he suggested an evening of champagne and dancing. They kissed. Jack and Diane entered the jazz club and spotted Tucker alone at the bar. Jack urged Diane to ignore Tucker, who greeted them and crowed that he'd heard Ashley had gone back to Paris. Jack snapped that it was none of Tucker's business, but he wondered how Tucker had known. Tucker stated that he made it his business to know things, but it was obvious why Ashley had left town. Tucker surmised that Ashley had taken his advice to return to the scene of the so-called crime, and she was about to find out everything she'd claimed had happened at the bistro hadn't happened. Jack imagined another scenario in which Tucker was the liar, leading to Ashley purging Tucker from her heart forever. Jack predicted that Tucker would be lonelier than he ever had been in his life, and even his delusions wouldn't keep him warm. Tucker chuckled as Jack walked away. At Newman, Nick invited Victor to grab a drink, but Victor reported that he was having dinner with Nikki. Nick asked how his mom was doing, and Victor indicated that she was pretending to be stronger than she was. Victor groused that he didn't like that Jack was sniffing around, and he revealed that Jack had bellied up to him at the bar to ask questions. Nick inquired about what exactly Jack knew, but Victor wasn't sure. Nick thought that Jack had Nikki's best interests at heart, especially if Jack knew she was drinking. Nick reasoned that Nikki might have opened up to Jack because he dealt with the same issues, and it made sense that Jack would be concerned enough to check in on them. Victor barked that he didn't need Jack's concern, and Nikki didn't need Jack's support. Nikki walked in and took issue with the way Nick was looking at her, as if she were seconds away from falling apart. Victor asked how things were going with her new sponsor, and Nikki indicated it was a much better fit. Nick wondered what had happened to Seth, and Nikki reported that he'd had a setback of his own. She explained that she needed someone on more solid ground with their recovery, and she thought the new person would work out well because they'd been in recovery a lot longer. Victor invited Nick to join them for dinner, but Nick mentioned that Christian had reminded him that it was taco and video game night. Nick stressed that he'd be there for anything Nikki needed, and he headed out. On the Crimson Lights patio, Sharon conducted an online business meeting with her sales team on her laptop. She encouraged them to make sure each customer felt as if they were the company's most important account. Nick quietly walked in as she ended the meeting by praising her employees and giving them an assignment that would kick off a brainstorming session. After she signed off, Nick proclaimed that she was amazing. Nick applauded Sharon's drive and energy, and he was impressed with the advice she'd given her employees, who he assumed were younger people. Sharon admitted that it was like speaking a foreign language when technology was involved, but Nick considered her team lucky to have her as a mentor. He admired that she'd kept a hand in the coffeehouse while running a new company, and she credited Esther for being a great manager. Sharon admitted that she hadn't been able to sell the place with all the memories there, and Nick was glad it had stayed in the family. Sharon thanked Nick for noticing that she'd managed to keep many balls in the air, and he expected her to continue to impress everyone the way she always had. Sharon pressed him to share what was going on with him, but Nick thought he was boring in comparison. Sharon inquired about Nikki. Nick lamented that his mother was one of the strongest people he knew, but the disease went in for the kill. Nick shared that Victor thought Nikki was putting on a brave front to hide how fragile she was. Sharon assured Nick that Nikki was surrounded by people who loved her and would help her get her addiction under control again. If she can, Nick murmured. Sharon asked if he really doubted it or if it was just an old, deep fear. She proclaimed that her money was on Nikki, who had gotten through it in the past and could do it again. At society, Victor inquired about Nikki's appetite, and she replied that she could eat. He mentioned that he'd had a talk with Jack at the bar earlier, and she hoped Victor had been civil. Victor shared that Jack had asked all kinds of questions that had indicated she'd told Jack about her abduction and her drinking. Nikki reasoned that she hadn't wanted to hide what was going on with the people who cared about her, and talking about it had made her feel stronger. Victor lectured that she knew he liked to keep their problems inside the family for everyone's protection. Nikki contended that the issue was her and her recovery, but Victor countered that Jack couldn't be trusted. Nikki pleaded with Victor not to make more out of it than it was. Uma's mystery invite shocks Genoa City. Why is everyone headed to France on Friday the 13th? Fire Nikki's secret sponsor revealed. Jack steps in while Victor remains in the dark. Broken heart Victor betrayed? Nikki lies about her recovery while Jack hides in plain sight. Firecracker Kyle's secret power play. Is he trying to impress Victor or destroy him? Astonished face Billy's investment in Dumas raises eyebrows. Is Sally being replaced already? Woman detective Phyllis plots again. What is her new scheme, and who's her next victim? Exploding head Tucker exposes Jack and Diane at the jazz club, but is Ashley the real target? Beverage box Nikki's struggle grows darker. There's fear in her eyes I've never seen before.